Welcome to the Growth Quest. Thank you, Chris, for joining us. We're very honored to have Chris with us. Chris is with the Reputation Partnership, and he's going to share some insights and tips about how to scale and grow your business. Chris, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great. Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Well, I spent many, many years in advertising, and I was regional CEO of Bates and BBDO and Y&R for Asia Pacific, and most recently M&C Saatchi. And then 2 years ago, I saw a new opportunity for what senior management really needed, which was way beyond marketing communications. And so I decided to leave and start a business in an area which no one else was operating in. So I formed the Reputation Partnership in order to really deliver major results for CEOs and company boards of listed companies.
Fantastic. And how do you specifically go about doing that? You actually consult with the CEOs themselves?
Yes. So I provide personal counsel to the CEOs of some of Asia's leading public companies and help guide them through the process of increasing their market valuation. And in the most simple terms, the valuation of corporations on stock markets around the world, when you boil it all down, comes down to two key criteria. One is corporate performance, and one is corporate perception. So what is the belief about this company? Do you have confidence in this company? How confident do you believe its business model is going to be going forward? So the key criteria which influence the perception of a company are the business strategy. Is it a real killer business strategy which has got massive potential for high margin growth? And secondly, it's the management team. Do they have the management leadership which we believe can really seize that growth? And there are many other elements which are related to that. But that's essentially what I do, and I guide organizations to develop irresistible market narratives.
Absolutely fantastic. This is fascinating stuff because I work a lot with pre-IPO companies.
Oh, really? Right.
And this is exactly the kind of things that they need because they've come from mom and pop kind of family-driven businesses, and now they're ready for showtime, but they're not ready.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. And the honest truth is, I'd say that of all the CEOs who I sit down and meet with, about 80% of them or more realize that they haven't really got a grip of how they're communicating the core messages of their business to the investment community and to all the influencers who influence the investment community. And very often, almost every time, there's hidden nuggets of amazing truth within the real core competencies, the facts, the real storyline of the company, which they're simply not selling properly. And it's my job to help them uncover those irresistible narratives and help them personally and on a corporate-wide basis to sell those narratives to the people who matter.
Fantastic. What are some of the mistakes, I would say, that CEOs are making today?
I think CEOs tend to trust too much in the advice of their CFOs and their investor relations people. A similar thing happens for senior management in most areas of expertise. Most CFOs and most investment relations people have a very literal interpretation of what are the hot buttons for the investment community. And very direct, because in every meeting they have, because they are finance and investment professionals, whenever they're presenting their quarterly results, they see the analysts go straight through to the back of the page and go straight through to the numbers to see if they're fixing with their model. The best example which I explain to them is right now Tesla. They have a company which sells hardly any cars in the world. 250,000 cars in the world, nothing. and its valuation is now higher than Ford and about the same as General Motors. It's not making a single dollar of profit. It has never made a single dollar of profit. It is eating cash so fast it's terrifying for almost every business on this planet. And yet, there's a belief system that this company is really going to be the first to seize the future. Elon Musk has done an extraordinary job of creating a vision for where this company is going to go and how exciting that vision is, which is almost incomparable. And he does it personally, he leads it personally, he communicates it personally and relentlessly. And as a result, the analysts and the investment community, when they see the quarterly numbers, they look at it through a lens of belief, a lens of confidence. And every company, it is the responsibility of a CEO, because the CEO's primary responsibility is to make sure that the share price and the market valuation is moving effectively. Their primary responsibility, amongst all their responsibilities, is to make sure that the investment community and all their influences understand and are motivated and excited by that narrative in the way that Elon Musk is able to make everyone excited by that narrative. Now, not every industry has that ability to create something so radically exciting. But in every company, in every industry, there is a narrative which can put everything you're doing in a clear context and create a perception amongst everyone who ever looks at your numbers that we can see where this is going and we can see how that makes sense and we have confidence in the future. So that is what I try to help companies to do.
Okay. So what are some of the roadblocks that you actually get to? Because at the end of the day, the analyst or the analytical mind is going to just look at the numbers all the time. And then the narrative sort of is an afterthought for these numbers-driven people, for example, right? Like, do you find that as a roadblock for you sometimes when you're trying to communicate the narrative?
But like all these things, you know, you can't just click your fingers and it happens. You've got to be very, very, very smart in terms of how you seed that message into the right people at the right time at the right place. So I'm not pretending for a second. I'm not sitting here and saying anything I do is simple. It's not. But what I'm saying is that everyone has a prejudice about every single piece of analysis they ever do in their lives. Everyone. A housewife going to a mom and pop shop has a point of view about that mom and pop shop. And once you have a point of view, you see everything which is consistent with that point of view, and you tend to focus less on those things which are inconsistent with that point of view. Back to the principles of marketing, and we're at the CMO conference today. But that essentially is what the principle of marketing is about. Managing perceptions of your target audience and their influences such that their vision of your business is more attuned to notice the things that suit their needs as opposed to those things which don't. It's perception management. And the same principle applies. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about selling a packaged good or whether you're selling a multi-billion-dollar global listed company. Perception management is the difference between success and failure. And the most important thing which anyone has to understand is that it isn't all about the physical, the practical limitations of what you deliver. It's how you present it so that people feel about it in the way that you want them to feel. That essentially is what the whole premise of branding is about. That's what the premise of all marketing is about. That's what marketing communications is about. That's what digital communications is about. Everything is about that. And the same applies when you're talking to the investment community and the market analysts. If they have a point of view about the company, they will notice the things that conform to that point of view. They will tend to focus less on those things that do not conform to that point of view. And back to that classic case study, Tesla as a business which no one would invest in unless you believed that the future was incredibly exciting. And the truth is, I don't want to labor the point on Tesla, but But the reality is, it looks like the future of electric vehicles will not be Tesla, it'll be Chinese companies. Currently, Chinese companies account for 45% of all electric vehicles sold on the planet. Tesla is marginal already, but they're still managing to keep that narrative going forward. And they're doing a brilliant job at it. But it's all about perception management, and Elon Musk is a classic one at maintaining that perception.
Absolutely. He's certainly a role model for me as well. Some of the other questions I wanted to ask you is, for example, if a CEO was interested to get into some brand narratives and some storytelling for growth, to get the gems out, what would you suggest? Where would they start? How would they start their journey?
You always start in exactly the same place. What's your ownable truth? You have to interrogate the product or the company until it confesses. That's hard work. You've got to really delve deep down into everything about the company. Whenever I go through these processes, I personally interview the CEO for between half a day and a full day. I personally interview every one of their management team for at least 1 or 2 hours. I carry out focus groups amongst all their staff. I carry out interviews with their analysts and their investors. And I talk to their suppliers. You interrogate the organization until you find the ownable truth, the facts, the realities about what the company does, how it does it, what people believe about it, how it treats its suppliers, how it treats its staff, how it treats its investors. There's always an ownable truth in there. So when you ask me, where do you start? It's like the first principle of building a brand. You start with the truth which is hidden away, camouflaged under all sorts of layers of bullshit. You've got to tear all that away and get down to the honest truth. Once you have that, you have a narrative which you can talk about with complete confidence. It's, like all marketing, marketing is not selling. It's talking about the truth. That's what great marketing is. It's selling the reality, the ownable truth that only you can say as confidently. And it's my job with every CEO to help them uncover that truth. And the problem is, for every CEO, just like for every senior marketer, they have a million things to worry about every single day. They have an agenda this high of issues they've got to be concerned about. And every day it changes. Something in their commercial environment changes. They might have a view of what that truth is, but they've never really sat down and interrogated it. And all their leading management team, they all look at the business from their own angle. They're obsessed about their own agenda. And they don't really look at the entire 360 of the business to identify really where the honest truths lie. And it's the same with branding. Why on earth does a marketer ever need a brand consultant or an agency? Why do they need that? The importance of what they deliver actually isn't that great. The importance of what they provide, however, is just objective analysis and insight to give them a point of view that they couldn't do on their own. So that is where you have to start. What is your ownable truth? It also applies to every individual, every business person. Stop trying to be what people want you to be. Identify what your ownable truth is and live it. And that is the key to a successful business life and to a happy life.
Fantastic. That's amazing. I think the authenticity of the outcomes, are staggering for most people. Have you found that after going through an exercise, the before and after, how do they come to grips with it?
It tends to have a broad spectrum of application, depending on the company, so I can't generalize. And it depends what the primary issue is. So at one end of the spectrum, all you ultimately end up with is a clear strategic plan and a clear action plan for the representation of the CEO and his most senior management team. that's at the most marginal end. So that's what you can end up with. If that's the key issue, if that's what you really have to address, that's fine. At the other end of the spectrum, I work with companies to rebuild their entire corporate culture. Having identified what the ownable truth is, you then see where all the dislocations are in the business. How many of the people don't quite grasp it? And then you work through the whole organization, aligning corporate culture at C-suite level, then down through the organization and building very often, I hate the cliche nowadays, but a purpose-driven brand. Not we're doing good all the time, but just what is our purpose as an organization? Does everyone really understand it? Do they live it and breathe it? And then that can lead to the way you develop and adapt your employment systems, your HR systems, the way you build corporate culture, your evaluation criteria, the way you organize, the way you communicate internally. So it can be as broad as all of that. So I hate to generalize, so it can be either very focused at one end of the spectrum or completely all-encompassing at the other. Every time it depends on what the needs are of the organization, and you don't really understand that until you get your teeth into it.
Right, fantastic. How do you get the validation besides focus groups and stuff? Do you use digital means to actually gather data from the interactions with the brand and its customers? How do you go about besides the intensive interrogation?
When you're talking about, for example, I think you're referring to customers, for example,
Yes.
or potential customers. It depends how you do it. So we lead, obviously, the standard focus groups, and we lead quantitative research studies, and that's absolutely fine. We tend to find a lot of benefit in building online communities. By doing that, you actually find that your customers or potential customers actually appreciate the engagement as well as sharing with you the honest truth of what they think. We tend to find things like social media pretty useless. And the reality is, and I know that this goes against the grain, but just 3 facts for you. First of all, if you look at the research work done by Keller Fay internationally, which is a word-of-mouth company, research company in the States, they found that if you evaluate all word-of-mouth, which any individual is involved in, only about 3% of brand-related word-of-mouth happens on social media. 3%. 75% is face-to-face.
Right.
Even when you do look at social media, the reality is that 88% of all digital conversations happen on dark social, on WeChat and WhatsApp and the rest of it, not on the Facebooks of the world. So you can't even monitor that. And even on the Facebooks of the world, for example, Pew Research, in their Spiral of Silence research, they've categorically proven that people don't communicate what they're really thinking on social media on Facebook. They will only communicate a point of view if it conforms to their peer group's point of view. It isn't necessarily what they believe. So I have a huge problem with organizations which think that if they're tracking customer sentiment on social media, they're really getting a genuine, objective point of view of what that customer sentiment is. They don't. It's a complete lie. It's completely unrepresentative. And so I'm sorry for the long-winded answer to that last question, but everyone thinks their first response is to, let's track social media. We track it last. We do track it, but it's really a peripheral element. And we monitor it, so we do everything else first, and then we look at social media just to see if there are any major dislocations. And there can be. And so if you find that what people are talking about on social media is completely different to what everyone is talking about through their core personal, real channels, then that's an issue which you need to address, and that's fine. But you do it last, you don't do it first.
Fantastic. It's absolutely right what you're saying about the social media today, and how a lot of it is dark, and the rest of it is just what people want other people to think of them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a major issue, and so many companies are measuring their customer engagement according to what they're achieving on social media. It's just naive.
So what would your advice be to them? If they're not measuring social or not measuring it as their first priority, what should they be doing then?
I guarantee you the most valuable thing you can do is an online community. Build your own online community of your customers or occasional customers. And incentivize them to be involved. They engage online in a far more open way than they ever would on social media, and in a more open way than they ever do in focus groups, because focus groups also have their huge limitations.
But what would your advice be? For example, I can understand the online community if you're selling education, for example, because especially schooling.
Of course.
Because that's a long
course.
drawn-out thing. But if you're selling razors or you're selling something that's almost impulse buying, how then would you?
It's amazing what you find, actually, that if you actually talk to customers, they're very happy to share their points of view. So I wouldn't dismiss online communities for any product category, to be honest. But the honest truth is, what I always do, personally, every single time, I will take 4 or 5 days of my own, and I'll go around all the retail outlets and I'll talk to people myself. It's not representative, but you get a feel, you get a real flavor. And I hardly ever find anyone from the C-suite in any companies nowadays who themselves take a day out a month and go out without anyone preparing it. Just go out, look what people are doing, watch what they're doing, watch how they're behaving along the shopping aisle. Talk to them. Say, excuse me, do you mind if I just ask you a question for 1 second? That's where you get the real flavor. That's the real pulse. No one does it anymore. They just look at reports.
Yes, that's right.
You don't feel like you don't get anything from reports. And that's why I like online communities, because at least they're able, a C-suite, member of the C-suite is able to personally engage and witness what's happening in real time as people are communicating about your business. It's very valuable.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a great gem, to be honest, because a lot of companies are probably not doing it. They're not engaged. They're not building communities online. No. They're just struggling just with just the basics at the moment.
Absolutely. So I think it's a massive opportunity for the future, and we use it a lot.
Right. What else do you see for the future? Like there's so much of disruption going on here, there, everywhere, especially for the bigger brands. Some of them are at great risk. Some of them are at real risk of actually, being disrupted very quickly. What is your advice to something like that?
Well, one of the most important pieces of advice, which I'm actually talking about at this conference, is generally the trust which customers have in big business is evaporating. The world is moving from horizontal axes of trust to vertical axes of trust. People no longer trust big business or big government all around the world, and it's here in Malaysia. No one trusts the big companies anymore because there's just been a relentless litany of evidence that they basically perform for their own benefit more than for the benefit of the people in the country. And if you accept that people don't trust big business anymore, and it's happening across the world, it's happening in Malaysia, and it's going to get worse for a whole bunch of reasons, which I won't bore you with now, then you have to accept that something much more important is happening. If people are following a vertical axis of trust, that means that they have more trust on people like me than they have in marketers, and than they have in big companies. Definitely than they have in CEOs or management teams of big companies. What that means is that things like customer reviews are much more important than advertising today. Frankly, it doesn't matter what advertising you do, generally. What matters is what customer reviews you achieve. 90% of shoppers all around the world don't buy anything in most categories without consulting a customer review. at some stage or other in their very short purchasing process. And one of the huge things which companies have got to learn to do is empower their customers to talk about them rather than them talking about themselves. That's terrifying for most command and control organizations. But it's the key to the future. No one in the future going forward is going to judge whether they're going to buy a product or a service according to its brand. They're going to judge it according to the reviews. I do it all the time. I'm sure you do it all the time. I might start a purchase cycle on the basis that I think I might buy. It happened to me last month. I thought I might buy a Sony because the last one worked very well. It takes me half an hour to go through the customer reviews, and right now the Samsung's a lot better. It's got nothing to do with brand affinity, nothing, zero. If I give you another example, the launch of the Apple iPhone 8, it's been pretty poor all around the world, but particularly in China, which is one of, as you know, Apple's 2 most important markets on earth. It's been a disaster, absolute disaster. Why? Hey, everyone loves the Apple brand. For every other launch, everyone was queuing up, millions and millions of people queuing up outside every Apple store. This time, no one was queuing up outside any Apple store. I've got the photographs to prove it. Why? It proves that the biggest, most powerful brand on earth cannot compete against the quality of customer reviews in today's world. So that's just an example for you of the way the future is going to be. And marketers have got to really, they've got to accept that in honest truth, your marketing is almost irrelevant. The quality of your product and service is critical, and how you manage and respond to customer reviews is critical. You get that right, the rest is easy.
Well spoken. Really, I think this is something. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but I think this should shake people out of their marketing stupor. And I think this is the kind of thinking that needs to happen in today's marketing world, because a lot of times it's been about hyping things up, and I think that's I mean, people are pulling the levers, but nothing's happening on the other end.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm not saying that that's 100% the fact across every product in every category right now, but that is the future which you have to face, and companies have got to start preparing for it now.
Yes. What else do you see around the corner?
I see a million things, but I think I might get too boring as we go if I develop on all of them. It's the most radical time in business. It's the most radical time in marketing. Anyone who thinks that the old principles of marketing are fit for purpose for tomorrow is ludicrously naive. The power of brand is diminishing. The importance of brand loyalty is diminishing. The importance of positioning, targeting is diminishing. Everyone talks about the marketing funnel from awareness to consideration to conversion. It's irrelevant. It doesn't exist. In most categories, people buy a third of their purchases. Their total purchase cycle is less than 1 day. It doesn't work like that anymore. Everything has got to be reinvented. So that could lead us to a very long conversation.
Yes. Yeah, fantastic. Anyway, thank you so much.